with regards to that rain potential too.
Well, you're certainly right about the duration. I mean, everybody wants to talk about what time is landfall and all that, but at the end of the day, landfall really doesn't matter that much. It's how long are the impacts over your area. And so obviously the strongest activity is down on the coast at the moment, but it is the duration of this that we're going to have to deal with here as we go through really the rest of the day. I'd say even the next 10 hours or so. So this is really just beginning across most of the area. And we'll get to that. But first, we do have a video here from down in Grand Isle that does show some of the flooding that we have ongoing down there. We can bring you that when we get that pulled up. And there you go. So this is just an example of what Scott was talking about here. And of course, all week long, we've told people to evacuate from Grand Isle and areas, really all the areas outside the levee system. And so if this doesn't give you an idea of what kind of situation we're dealing with down here, I don't know what will. This is just a tremendous amount of water pouring in. Grand Isle right now, right in the eastern side of the eye wall. So the most intense part of Hurricane Ida anywhere at the moment is right where you see this camera right here. You are right in the eastern side of the eye wall. So you can see the trees off into the distance there. These are winds coming in here gusting to 130 to 140 miles per hour. We did get a measurement of 136 in Grand Isle before the instrumentation went down a little while ago. And you can see water pouring in. Obviously, it goes without saying that the whole island is underwater at this point. This video is from Island Realty, and so you can see that water just continuing to flow on shore as Hurricane Ida moves in. And so we do talk about weakening, of course, with systems as they move in, but you see that wind out there. It's going to take a very long time for this system to weaken beyond the point of this amount of wind. So we do have the official landfall point. And so at this point, we're in a matter of watching this move through inland. Now it's making landfall at a point where there's probably some strip of land or an island out there, maybe around Port Fourchon or something that, you've still got a little more water overall to go through. So we're not just going to start seeing instant weakening with this system at this point. So tremendous video there. We'll take that down. We'll go back to, and as a matter of fact, let me get back to the radar real quick here since we had that video right there, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. There is your landfall point, and again, it's most likely going to be right around Port Fourchon, so you've got that little strip of the map that's sticking out, and as Scott mentioned, you've got the halfway point of the eye here moving on land, which is why, or at least crossing that border, which is why we have official landfall. But again, look at all this area as we know. I mean, there's not a lot of protection here from these storms, and we talk about the coastal erosion and losing the wetlands all the time, and this is why, because there's not much down there to slow this storm down for another 2 or 3 hours until it continues to move farther inland. So at this point, I would not expect any drastic weakening by any stretch, and I will say it is very rare, certainly it's rare to get category 4 or 5 storms making landfall as it is here in the U.S., as we know, but it is also very rare to get a storm making landfall at maximum intensity, peak intensity. I mean, just by the nature of these things, they tend to weaken getting closer to shore. Now, we've seen a few more of these over the past couple of years. You think about Laura, certainly Michael a couple of years ago, but on the grand scheme of things, you don't typically get a storm at maximum strength moving on shore. And unfortunately, for all of us here in Southeast Louisiana, that's what we have. So you saw that video coming in around Grand Isle when I mentioned being on the worst part of this storm. I mean, look at this eye wall here. This is an extremely intense radar presentation in this eye wall as it continues to move on land. And as we were talking about earlier, the radar here, we're not talking about summertime thunderstorms that could get 50, 60,000 feet. In general, tropical systems are a little shallower. And so when you're getting lightning here, that is just an indication of tremendous rainfall rates and tremendous wind and intensity coming around the eastern side of this eye at this point. We've got some video from the hurricane hunters we can show you as they've been out and about, of course, really zigzagging this system for the past couple of days, really showing how well this has shaped up for us, and of course getting the data in there for us. Obviously that is within the eye. You can see the clearing up above that, and certainly they have been just sort of navigating their way through here, 2 planes at a time sometimes at different levels, flying through and dropping all the instrumentation to give us the latest data and that sort of thing. So at the moment, we are, we don't really need that data anymore, because at this point we are watching this move inland. We'll go back to the radar here and we'll show you that we are no longer in a forecast mode at this point. I mean, when these things start coming inland, you are now in sort of an analysis and a watching mode here. So there's really not much left to forecast. We know it's a Category 4 storm. We know it's moving inland, probably following that track right along the Lafourche, Terrebonne Parish border. There's going to be some slight wobbles every now and then, as Scott mentioned, and you can see that even on the radar. Last frame, you know, you were heading a little north, now maybe a little bit, you know, west, northwest. I mean, it's not going to make a difference, though, in terms of the impact to the area. It's just a tremendously intense storm system that is just now beginning to make its way into southeast Louisiana. North Shore still looking okay for the most part. You do have some little cells popping up in some of these bands. Here's a pretty potent cell coming towards the Diamond Head area right now. And some of those, not necessarily now on the north side, but once we start to get those on more of the eastern side of this, obviously those bands will start to produce isolated tornadoes. We've seen tornado warnings already over towards Pensacola. Scott a little while ago mentioned the flash flood warning over there. So, you know, I know a lot of people evacuated farther off to the east. That's certainly the right call. I mean, at this point, to get out, no question. But if you're still around that Mobile area, Pensacola, have the local TV stations up. If you're watching us online, have the local reports up, because if those tornado warnings pop up, you'll definitely need to, you know, stay sheltered over there. And these tropical tornadoes, as you know, move super quick. We're talking 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. You don't have much time to take shelter when those pop up. And so before that video we got from Grand Isle, we were talking about the slow progression of this system. And this is that short range model here that has been really dialing up this system pretty well in terms of the forecast track once you get within a couple hours, of course. And these things are just running constantly. This one in particular runs every hour, so it's a pretty good idea of the latest projections here. But keep in mind, it is just past noon right now here in southeast Louisiana, just past noon. And the landfall just occurred down around Port Fourchon. And so watch what happens as we roll this forecast model forward. You're talking about northern Lafourche Parish here for the center 6 hours from now. Now, obviously, you're going to give or take a little time. But we do expect that system to slow down as it gets, you know, a little bit farther inland. It's just going to slow down a little bit. That's the nature of this, at least this particular storm in the forecast. And so as we continue to look at this on the forecast model, think about those intense bands on the eastern side. Heaviest activity here, central Lafourche, getting up into southwestern St. Charles. But, you know, again, just the intense bands coming into the metro New Orleans area. And you just have so many of those factors coming together here across really most of the South Shore and a good portion of the Florida parishes as well, because you're talking about tremendous rainfall rates in these bands on the eastern side. You're talking about significant wind gusts. You're still looking at this point by 6 p.m., I think, you know, 80, 90, even maybe 100 mile an hour wind gusts tucked in there somewhere, not out of the question, but at the very least 70 to 80, and that's 6 hours from now. And then as you roll that forward, the center begins to drift north and maybe just a touch northwest up towards Baton Rouge, most likely running between New Orleans and Baton Rouge at the end of the day. But either way, that's 8:30. That's 8.5 more hours here. You're starting to see that activity spreading inland to the Florida parishes. You're still dealing with these heavy bands on the eastern side. Obviously, there's still all that air getting drawn up on the eastern side of that system. And so the storm surge flooding will continue south to north. Lake Pontchartrain will continue to get that water pushing in south to north. And then we'll look for those winds and rains to continue to be extremely heavy. And then as that system continues to move a little bit farther inland here, look at the tremendous amount of rain. That's 12 hours from now. So we are still dealing with this really, really heavy rainfall. As the system moves in, it starts to unwind a bit. So you start to see more of that banding take shape. So now you look at that band over by Mobile. I mean, this is just a forecast model, obviously, but, you know, these would be potential tornadoes moving inland. Over towards Pensacola, if you've evacuated over there, those cells could be producing tornadoes. Certainly the bands here across the eastern parts of our viewing area into southern Mississippi, producing isolated tornadoes. And the problem is this storm doesn't sweep east immediately. It goes north for a while and then east. And so if you think about those longitudinal lines on a globe or a map, until the center gets east of your line, you're still in that flow and in that heavy rain band and in that threat for some of those heavy rain bands to continue. And that's where we're at here still by daybreak tomorrow. And a lot of the models have been hinting that while you do get that drier air wrapping around here probably by mid-morning tomorrow, that you still have, you can see there, you still have a little bit of that development continuing even into Tuesday as that band is still getting drawn up to the south. And again, we've seen this before in these tropical systems. They'll pull moisture all the way up from, you know, the Pacific Ocean when they're in South Carolina. I mean, they just have that deep feed, the strong ones do. And so I think we're looking at the potential for some real flooding issues here over the next few hours. And on the satellite, you can certainly see that presentation here in terms of that eye wall. Again, just about the strongest point of this storm right now as it's moving inland. And you just don't see that too often with these tropical systems. So those wind gusts already at New Orleans here at 61. That is, I believe, the airport location we have on there, so possibly even higher gusts at this point over towards the lakefront airport being measured.